You're just the help. Remember that." That's what they told her, spitting hierarchy at a woman they thought they could shrink. But the woman they tried to belittle carried the one truth that could destroy their golden prince. And when she walked away in silence, she took his entire future with her. Stay with us, because sometimes the woman they tried to silence rises higher than anyone expected. Sometimes the story they meant to break becomes the story that crowns her in strength. And tonight, power chooses a new name. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments. Have you ever rewritten your own story? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Black Stories Untold with love, and ring that notification bell for more heartwarming stories that celebrate strength. Point. The night broke long before anyone realized it. It began with moonlight spilling over the glass walls of Devaun Martin's lakeside estate, turning every polished surface into something that glittered. The house looked like perfection from the outside. Music drifted through open doors. Laughter rose from the terrace. Guests in silk dresses and tailored suits floated through the rooms as if the evening belonged to them. Cameras flashed. Champagne poured endlessly. Everything in Devaun's world sparkled. Inside that world, he stood at the center of it all. Tall, handsome, immaculate in a midnight blue suit, he moved with the confidence of a man who believed the universe bent in his favor. His sandy hair fell just right. His smile was a rehearsed masterpiece. Every part of him was curated for admiration. People leaned in when he spoke, eager for approval. And for most of his life, he had given it freely. But not tonight. Tonight something felt off. A hollow ache hid beneath his polished exterior. He had everything, and yet nothing felt steady inside him. He ignored it, raising another glass, charming another guest, reminding himself he was fine. Far above the noise and glitter, Etta Wright rocked his toddler gently in her arms. The nursery lights glowed softly against her warm brown skin, her almond eyes peaceful as she hummed a quiet melody. She wore simple clothes, nothing like the jewels downstairs, yet she carried a grace that filled the room. Her presence soothed the child instantly. It soothed anyone who stepped near her. And though she rarely spoke above a soft tone, her calm strength radiated in every gesture. She had worked for Devaun for nearly 2 years. She had loved the child from the moment he had first curled his tiny fingers around hers. She knew the layout of the house better than most guests below. Yet she always stayed in the background, steady and unseen. Until tonight. Downstairs, Devaun stood with a small circle of men who had already had too much to drink. Their laughter was sharp, brash, careless. They nudged him, waiting for him to join in as they made comments about staff, about women, about people they believed were beneath them. And Devaun, exhausted from holding up the version of himself that felt more costume than truth, cracked. He let their mockery pull him in. He let the pressure push words out of his mouth he would never have dared sober. Words that sliced through the air like something poisonous. Words that reduced Etta to a stereotype. Words that should never have been spoken by any man, let alone the man who trusted her with his child. The men laughed. Devaun pretended to laugh too, though something inside him twisted. He did not see her. He did not see Etta standing on the staircase landing, frozen in the soft shadow near the banister, the melody she had been humming fading on her lips. She had paused only to listen for guests before coming down to hand off a toy the child refused to sleep without. She had heard every word instead. Her face tightened, not in fury, but in something far worse. Quiet heartbreak, the kind that sinks into the bones. The kind that tells a woman she is safer walking away than staying where she is unseen. She stepped back into the shadows, breath trembling, clutching the toy to her chest. By morning, Before the estate fully woke, she placed her resignation letter on the marble counter. No explanation, no request for a reference, just her name written in calm, graceful handwriting. She left without waking Devaun. She left without looking back. She left carrying the secret that would one day unravel his entire world. She was carrying his child. The fall did not happen all at once. It came in quiet pieces, slipping through the cracks of Devaun Martin's perfect life long after Etta's footsteps had disappeared from his doorway. First came the silence, not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind that sits on the chest and steals the breath from a house once full of warmth. The child no longer giggled down the hallway. The soft hum of Etta's lullabies no longer drifted from the upstairs rooms. Every corner felt colder, sharper, empty in ways Devaun could not name. Then came the losses. Deals that once felt guaranteed slipped through his fingers. Investors withdrew with polite apologies. Colleagues watched him with wary eyes. His confidence cracked under the weight of rumors that followed him like shadows. It was as if the universe had grown tired of protecting a man who refused to protect the people who cared for him. He tried to find her. He called every number he had, reached out to old contacts, searched through city records, pleaded with agencies who only shook their heads. Etta Wright had disappeared as though the world itself had wrapped its arms around her and said enough. You have carried enough pain. Let us hide you for a while. At night, Devaun would sit alone in the dim light of the nursery, the rocking chair motionless, the scent of baby powder still clinging to the air. He would stare at the empty crib and wonder when things had begun to rot. The truth he refused to face was that the night Etta left had been the night he lost the only part of himself that felt real. While he unraveled, far from Charleston, Etta rebuilt herself. Atlanta welcomed her with anonymity and compassion. She found a small apartment with warm walls and sunlight that pooled on the floors each morning. She found work with people who respected her, people who saw her quiet strength as something powerful rather than invisible. And when her son entered the world on a rainy morning, she held him to her chest and felt her heart break open into something fierce and unshakable. He had his father's gray-blue eyes, framed by her long lashes, a tiny reminder of a past that wounded her and a future she refused to let be defined by harm. She whispered promises into his soft hair, promises of safety, of tenderness, of a life built on dignity rather than apology. She told herself she did not need Devaun, that her son did not need him either. She repeated it every day. Yet in the late hours of the night, when the world quieted and the loneliness came creeping, she would sit in the rocking chair with her baby resting on her chest and wonder, would he have been different if he had known? Would he have understood the weight of his words if he had seen the child those words had nearly stolen from him? Her love for her son was unwavering. Her trust for Devaun was gone, not because she hated him, but because she chose peace over chaos, pride over pain, self-worth over being someone a man remembered only after losing her. Etta carried her son with the strength of generations. She built a life with both hands, every day shaping something she could stand tall inside of. Her heart stayed guarded, not out of bitterness, but out of the certainty that some doors must stay closed until the person on the other side learns how to knock with respect. She refused to let heartbreak define her. She would not let regret raise her child. But even as she held herself steady, one truth lingered like a quiet ache in her chest. There are some stories you cannot outrun, some connections that return in unexpected ways. Some wounds that only time, growth, and truth can heal. And Devaun was not done learning who he truly was yet. The fall arrived not like a storm, but like a slow unraveling. It began with a single lawsuit, a sharp legal blow tied to his own carelessness. Then came the headlines, the whispered conversations in boardrooms, the investors who suddenly found reasons not to return his calls. Everything Devaun Martin once leaned on began to crumble beneath him, and for the first time in his life, charm could not save him. His reflection in the mirror grew unfamiliar. The immaculate suit could not hide the exhaustion in his eyes. The expensive watch could not distract from the tremor in his hands. His arrogance had been polished to perfection for years, but beneath it lay something fragile, almost hollow. That hollowness finally split open the day the judge ordered mandatory therapy sessions for negligence and workplace misconduct. The first time he stepped into the quiet room filled with soft chairs and patient silence, he felt stripped bare. No audience, no reputation to uphold, no applause for performing the role of a man everyone admired. Only truth, uncomfortable and sharp, waiting for him to stop running. Therapy peeled him open slowly. Every session pressed against the walls he had built as a boy growing up in a home where appearances mattered more than honesty. Privilege had been handed to him like armor, and he wore it so tightly he forgot it was not skin. Generational pride had been stitched into him until he believed vulnerability was weakness. Success became a script he performed without ever asking who he was beneath it. Week by week, those truths emerged, ugly, necessary, human. In the quiet moments after each session, he found his mind wandering to Etta Wright. Not in longing, but in recognition. She had been the one unvarnished thing in his polished world. He remembered the softness of her voice when she soothed his toddler, the way she moved through the house like a gentle light, the steadiness she carried in her presence. He remembered the laughter of his child in her arms and understood now that what he had lost was not just a nanny or an employee. He had lost the one piece of his life that had been real. Late at night, he would sit in the nursery where dust had begun to settle on the unused rocking chair. He would run his hand along the empty crib, feeling the weight of his mistakes press into his palms. Regret came quietly but fiercely. It did not drown him. It carved him open so he could finally see himself clearly. This clarity did not bring comfort. It brought responsibility. He began rebuilding from the inside out. No announcements, no grand gestures. He attended every therapy session, confronting the wounds he carried and the wounds he caused. He stepped back from his company, allowing others to lead where his ego once demanded control. He volunteered at local shelters, sitting with people whose lives had been shaped by struggles he had never acknowledged. Humility became something he practiced rather than preached. He did not do any of it for Etta. Not anymore. He did not even do it for his reputation. He did it because he could no longer bear the man he had been. The man who had stood in his own house and spoken cruelty into the air without understanding the weight of his words. A reckoning had begun, slow, painful, transformative, and though he did not yet know it, this journey inward was the first step toward the life he was meant to build, a life shaped by truth instead of performance. A life that would eventually lead him back to the woman who once carried his child in silence. But for now, this was only a beginning, the quiet rebirth of a man learning how to be human. Etta's rise did not begin with fanfare. It began with quiet mornings in her small Atlanta apartment, sunlight warming the hardwood floors while her newborn slept against her chest. It began with long nights arranging borrowed furniture, balancing bottles, and whispering promises into soft curls that carried a hint of gray-blue. It began with small steps, trembling but determined, from a woman who had once been made to feel invisible. She had not planned on becoming anything more than a survivor. She wanted peace, a roof, a life untouched by the carelessness of someone who had once held her future in his hands without ever seeing its worth. But destiny often blooms in unexpected light, and Etta's light had always been impossible to ignore. The family she worked for was unlike any she had known. A billionaire philanthropic couple with hearts as large as their wealth, people who listened deeply and looked beyond the surface. They noticed the steadiness in her voice when she soothed their children. They noticed the brilliance in her eyes when she organized their chaotic schedule with grace. They noticed the creative spark in the way she turned simple routines into moments of magic. They saw her heart, the way it carried warmth even when she was tired, even when she was healing wounds no one knew existed. They invited her into conversations she had never imagined being part of. They asked her opinion, and she offered it softly at first, then with growing confidence. One evening, as she explained her vision for accessible childcare for single mothers, something in the room shifted. The couple exchanged a knowing look. They saw potential where others had overlooked it. They saw a leader waiting to step into her fullness. They invested in her idea, not as charity, but as belief. Etta built the foundation with cautious hands and fierce conviction. She created programs that offered safety, education, and support for families who had been forgotten by systems not built for them. She hired women who carried scars that looked like her own. She designed centers filled with sunlight, soft rugs, and spaces where mothers could breathe again. Within 2 years, she stood on stages in tailored suits that framed her strength, her curls shining under bright lights as she spoke to crowds about dignity and possibility. Her voice became a lifeline for women searching for their own worth. She became CEO of a groundbreaking childcare empire, not built from privilege but from purpose. Reporters asked her how she did it. She smiled with quiet mystery. She did not speak of the night she walked away from a house where her heart had cracked. She did not speak of the man who had once held her dreams so carelessly. She kept that chapter tucked safely away, not out of anger but out of protection. Her son deserved a story shaped by love, not regret. She carried his tiny hand as she walked into boardrooms. She read him lullabies between drafting proposals. She taught him to stand tall long before he learned to walk. He grew up surrounded by the sound of his mother's voice empowering others, her presence shaping the world around her. Every step she took was rooted in the moment she chose herself. Every success was tied to the decision to leave behind a life that had not valued her, and every time she closed her eyes, she knew the truth. She had not simply rebuilt, she had ascended. Not despite the pain, but because she refused to let it define her. And somewhere in Charleston, a man who once believed he had everything was beginning to understand just how much he had lost. Fate rarely announces itself. It slips into a room quietly, rearranging lives with a single breath. And on the night of the prestigious Horizon Humanitarian Awards, fate arrived wrapped in gold light and velvet curtains. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers. Cameramen lined the entrance. Guests moved like slow constellations, every step sparkling with ambition and power. Devaun Martin stood near the far wall, his posture humble, his suit dark and simple. He no longer sought the spotlight. He no longer needed the world to recognize him. He had spent 2 years learning how to be small in the best way, learning how to listen rather than perform. His company had become a sponsor for the ceremony, their first attempt at rebuilding trust through community work and ethical partnerships. Tonight was not about him. He reminded himself of that over and over. He was simply here to observe, to honor the people who were doing the real work of healing the world. But fate had other plans. The room stirred. A whisper passed through the crowd, growing, gathering, folding into an awe that rippled from one guest to another. Heads turned toward the entrance. Cameramen straightened, the doors opened, and the air shifted. Etta Wright stepped onto the red carpet. The golden gown she wore captured every glimmer from the chandelier above. It clung to her curves with the confidence of a woman who knew her worth, then flowed around her legs like poured sunlight. Her skin glowed with the warmth of deep honey. Her curls were swept into a regal crown. She walked with a quiet command that turned admiration into reverence. On her left hand rested a diamond ring, sleek and striking, gifted to her by the billionaire couple who had become her family in purpose. Its brilliance belonged to royalty, but it did not overshadow her. She wore it like a woman who had built her own throne. Gasps filled the room. Devaun did not gasp. He forgot how to breathe. His heart stilled in his chest as if the universe pressed pause. He knew that posture. He knew that radiant strength. He knew the presence of her, the way one knows the rhythm of their own heartbeat. She had been gone for years, and yet the sight of her reopened every memory he had tried to keep, locked away. Etta surveyed the room with calm grace. If she was nervous, it did not touch her. This world belonged to her now. She had earned every inch of that carpet with sweat and tears and unspoken battles. Then the world shifted again. A small figure stepped out from behind her legs. A little boy dressed in a tiny navy suit, holding her hand as if it was the safest place he knew. His curls framed his face in soft waves. His skin was a beautiful blend of hers, and his eyes were unmistakable. Gray-blue, Devaun's eyes. The breath Devaun had been holding collapsed in his chest. He pressed a hand to the side of his chair, steadying himself as the truth swept through him like a tidal wave. Not imagined, not possible, not coincidence. His son, the child he had never known, the child he had lost before he even realized he had something to lose. Etta looked radiant, powerful, untouchable as she guided her little boy down the carpet. Cameras flashed around them like scattered stars. And Devaun stood frozen on the edge of the crowd, the noise fading until all he could hear was the echo of a life that might have been and the pull of the life suddenly standing before him. Fate had intervened, and nothing would ever be the same again. The collision did not happen with sound. It happened in silence so heavy it swallowed the room whole. Etta stepped onto the marble floor of the ballroom, her son's small hand wrapped around her finger, her golden gown shimmering like a sunrise carved into silk. Every camera turned, every whisper sharpened, but her face stayed calm, regal, untouched by the chaos she stirred simply by existing. Across the room, Devaun stood rooted to the spot. His breath left his body as if the air had been punched out of him. Years folded in on themselves. The man he once was collided violently with the man he had become, and the impact threatened to crack him open. His eyes climbed up the length of her gown, over her shoulders held in perfect stillness, up to the face he had tried to forget but never truly let go. And she looked back. Her gaze was not soft. It was not angry. It was controlled, unreadable, a fortress made of dignity. Nothing in her expression revealed how it felt to see him again. That alone told him everything. Then the little boy stepped slightly forward, peeking around her dress. His curls framed his face with gentle innocence. His tiny suit was almost comically perfect. His grip on Etta's gown was tender, but it was his eyes that destroyed Devaun. Gray-blue. His mother's shape, his father's color. His world tilted, threatening to collapse as the truth struck with devastating clarity. This was his child, his blood, his future, a life he had not known existed, a life he had abandoned without ever being given the chance to stay. Cameras flashed, gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered too loudly. Another filming phone lifted. The moment became public without mercy. Etta did not flinch. She adjusted her son's collar with a graceful hand, her eyes briefly lowering to him with warmth so fierce it made Devaun ache. Then she lifted her chin and walked past him with steps that never faltered. He felt the air move as she passed, carrying hints of the life she had built far from his reach. A life he had not been worthy of witnessing. Inside the event hall, the lights dimmed and applause echoed, But Devaun heard none of it. He followed her quietly, weaving through guests, until he found her standing alone near a quiet alcove. Her son played with the satin folds of her dress, humming softly to himself. Devaun approached with a trembling voice he barely recognized. He asked the only question that mattered, not out of anger, not out of demand, only out of heartbreak. Is he mine? Etta did not turn immediately. She smoothed her son's curls, lifted him into her arms, and whispered something tender into his ear. The boy wrapped his arms around her neck, his small face resting against her shoulder. Then she faced Devaun. Her expression did not crack, her voice did not tremble. Her strength filled the space between them like a quiet storm. He deserved better than the man you were. The words were soft, not accusing, not cruel. Simply truth, and truth spoken gently cuts more deeply than anger ever could. Her son stirred in her arms. She kissed the top of his head, her eyes never leaving Devaun's. Her entire posture said the conversation was over, that the past was carved in stone, that the child she carried away from him years ago had been raised in love, not bitterness. And as she walked back into the glow of the ceremony, Devaun remained in the shadows, shattered and awakened all at once. For the first time, he understood the full weight of who he had been, and the even heavier weight of who he needed to become. The truth arrived in the quiet of an early morning, long before the city fully woke. No cameras, no crowd, no glittering gowns or watchful eyes. Just a small private room in a community center and two people sitting across from each other with years of unspoken history hanging heavy between them. Etta sat with her back straight, her hands folded in her lap, her presence calm yet guarded. The soft morning light touched her skin like a blessing, making her look almost otherworldly. She wore no makeup today, no gold, no diamonds, only truth, only dignity. She had built a life so steady that even her silence felt strong. Devaun entered quietly, closing the door behind him. He looked different in the morning light, too. Older, humbled. His suit was simple. His posture was careful, as if afraid to take up too much space. His eyes carried the raw ache of a man standing in front of the truth he had spent years running from. For a long moment, neither spoke. Etta finally lifted her gaze. It was not sharp. It was not forgiving. It was simply honest. A mirror he had avoided for too long. She began with the facts. She told him about the morning she left his house, her heart shattered by words he had thrown into the air without care. She spoke of the moment she discovered she was pregnant, alone and terrified and determined to protect the life inside her from becoming collateral damage in someone else's arrogance. She told him how she rebuilt her world in Atlanta, brick by steady brick, with no expectation that he would ever deserve a place in it. Devaun listened, each word landing heavy. She told him of the loneliness of new motherhood, the fear, the joy, the hours spent rocking their son to sleep, whispering promises she had no help fulfilling. She told him of the peace she found in walking away, a peace that taught her the difference between being needed and being valued. By the time she finished, his eyes glistened with tears he did not try to hide. Then it was his turn. He spoke of the lawsuit that cracked open the illusion of his life. He spoke of therapy sessions that forced him to dismantle beliefs he did not even know he carried. He spoke of admitting to himself that he had been shaped by privilege, expectation, and cowardice. He confessed how long it took to see the emptiness behind his success. He told her how her absence revealed the truth of who he had been and the truth of who he needed to become. He did not offer excuses. He did not ask for forgiveness. He simply opened himself, raw and unpolished, for the first time in his life. Etta studied him. This man was not the one she had left behind. His ego was gone. His certainty was gone. What remained was quieter and truer. And for a fleeting moment, she saw the change taking root. Something slow, something real. But reality did not soften her resolve. "You do not get us back because you are sorry." Her voice was soft yet unyielding. "You earn it through who you are when no one is watching." Devaun bowed his head, not in shame, not in defeat, but in acceptance. For the first time, he did not defend himself. He did not plead. He simply absorbed her words, letting them carve a new path inside him. The room remained quiet, not empty, but full of the fragile possibility of a beginning neither dared to name. It was the truth in the quiet, and it was enough for now. Weeks passed like slow, careful breaths, each one reshaping the landscape of their lives. Nothing happened fast, nothing dramatic or loud. Change unfolded in small, deliberate steps, like sunlight creeping across a dark room until everything quietly revealed itself. Etta kept her guard high, her boundaries firm. She protected her son with the same fierce tenderness she had carried since the day he was born. She allowed no promises, no grand gestures, no shortcuts to redemption, only consistency, only truth. And Devaun showed up. The first time he arrived, he stood on the porch holding a canvas tote filled with books and snacks he had researched online. He carried no pride, only nervous hope. When the little boy opened the door, curious eyes shining like storm clouds before rain, Devaun knelt instead of towering above him. He spoke gently. He waited to be invited in. When the child offered him a toy car, Devaun's eyes softened so deeply it fractured something inside Etta. He stayed for an hour that day, 2 the next. Then afternoons turned into early evenings spent building block towers, reading picture books, and discovering the quiet magic of a child's laughter. Devaun did not rush affection. He let the boy set the pace. He let trust grow like wildflowers, slowly, patiently, without pressure. In the quiet moments after each visit, Etta found herself watching from the edges, arms crossed, gaze steady, heart trembling beneath its armor. She waited for him to slip, to perform, to pretend. But he never did. He was present in a way she had never seen before. He was real. Outside of those visits, Devaun kept working on himself. He attended therapy twice a week without fail, his notes filled with the language of accountability. He stepped back from the company that had once defined him. He let others lead. He let go of the power he had clung to for so long, realizing it had never brought him peace. Then he did something few expected, something that made Etta pause when she first heard it. He founded a nonprofit dedicated to expanding childcare access in underserved communities. No press release, no cameras, no announcement. Just a quiet mission born from the memory of a single mother rocking her baby alone in a small apartment. A mission shaped by a truth he could no longer ignore. He wanted to become a man worthy of fatherhood, not a man who merely performed it. Slowly, a small window opened in Etta's heart. Not an invitation, not forgiveness, just a space where possibility lived. A space where she allowed herself to breathe around him without bracing for disappointment. One afternoon, she walked into the living room and froze. Devaun sat on the rug with their son perched in front of him, curls springing in every direction. In his hands were 2 dolls with tangled hair. He practiced braiding slowly, tongue pressed to the corner of his mouth in concentration. When he finally braided his son's curls into a tiny, crooked twist, the boy giggled, clapping proud little hands. Devaun laughed too, that quiet, humbled laugh she had rarely heard from him before. No pride, no ego, only joy. Etta felt something shift inside her, something tender, something terrifying. He was becoming a father, not by blood alone, but by choice, by effort, by presence. She stood in the doorway, heart thudding, watching the 2 pieces of her life sit together on a soft rug, building something she never thought she would see. A window had opened, only a sliver, but enough to let in light. The night shimmered with soft lights and low music, the kind that wrapped itself around a room like a warm embrace. This gala was different from the ones of Etta's past. It was not about wealth, it was not about reputation, it was about impact. Her company had grown from a single idea whispered in a quiet apartment to a nationwide movement lifting mothers out of the shadows and into their own power. Etta moved through the ballroom like someone who finally understood the magnitude of her own strength. Her champagne gown flowed behind her like a promise fulfilled. Her curls framed her face in soft waves. Her smile held the quiet confidence of a woman who had built her life from truth. But tonight held something unexpected, something tender. Backstage, behind the curtains and velvet ropes, Devaun stood with their son in his arms. The little boy clutched a bouquet of small white lilies and bright yellow marigolds, wrapped clumsily in tissue paper. His tiny legs kicked with excitement. His curls were freshly braided, crooked but perfect. This moment was not planned for applause. It was not staged for prestige. A mutual friend on the planning team had arranged it quietly, believing Etta deserved something real on a night filled with spectacle. When she stepped behind the curtain during a short break, she froze. There they were. Her son's eyes lit up instantly, arms stretching toward her. Devaun gently lowered him, letting the boy run to her with the bouquet held high above his head. Etta knelt, accepting the flowers as if receiving treasure. Her eyes softened, warmth filling every line of her face. When she rose, she finally looked at Devaun. The air between them shifted. He stepped closer, careful not to intrude, hands trembling slightly at his sides. He had dressed simply, black suit, no flashy watch, no need to impress. He came as the man he had fought to become. Etta held the bouquet in one hand, her son clinging to her leg. She waited. She did not rescue him from the silence. She let him speak. His voice broke as he finally did. "You built the life you deserved." His eyes glistened. He swallowed hard. "And I am proud of you. Proud in a way I cannot put into words. Even if you never choose me, even if I only ever stand on the sidelines watching you shine, I will still be proud, because you made something beautiful out of the pain I caused." He took a breath that stuttered. "And because you showed me who I could be if I stopped running from myself." For a long, breathless moment, Etta said nothing. Her heart pressed against the walls she had built around it. She had loved carefully, hesitantly. She had learned the cost of trusting too easily. But the man standing before her was no longer the boy who had wounded her. The transformation in him was not loud, not decorated. It was steady and real. Something inside her softened. She reached forward slowly, her fingers brushing against his hand. The touch was feather-light, tentative, almost sacred. Devaun's breath caught. His eyes fell shut as quiet tears slipped down his cheeks, tears he did not bother to hide. Their son looked up curiously, reaching to pat his father's face with a tiny hand. Etta's voice was a whisper, soft but full of meaning. Slow. She squeezed his hand gently. "We do this slow." The curtain rustled behind them. The music swelled out front. The world waited. But for a moment, just one stolen moment, the three of them stood together in the wings. A family not yet whole, but beginning. Not healed, but healing. Not perfect, but possible. And when Etta stepped back into the spotlight moments later, she carried their son in her arms and a new truth in her heart. Sometimes love does not return all at once. Sometimes it returns slowly, like dawn. The garden carried the kind of quiet that feels holy. Lanterns hung from low branches, glowing like suspended stars above a long cedar table draped in white linen. Night flowers opened their petals to the soft wind. The billionaire couple who had once believed in Etta before anyone else moved discreetly through the space, giving her a celebration worthy of the empire she had built. This dinner was for her, her work, her triumph. And Devaun walked beside her not as an apology, not as a shadow, not as a man trying to fix the past, but as someone who had finally learned how to stand on his own 2 feet with humility and purpose. Their son darted between them, giggling as he chased fireflies that flickered like tiny spirits blessing the night. Etta watched the little boy run, her heart full in ways she once feared it never could be again. She had fought for her peace. She had built her success with her own brilliance. She had risen from the ashes of heartbreak and woven a life shimmering with dignity. And still, life had surprised her with something more gentle, something more tender, something real. Devaun sat across from her during dinner, laughing softly at their son's attempts to steal berries from the table, his eyes warm with adoration he never tried to hide. He did not reach for her too quickly. He did not smother or perform. He simply existed beside her with a steadiness she had once thought impossible for him. This was the man therapy had peeled open, the man fatherhood had softened, the man truth had remade. Later, after plates were cleared and the child fell asleep in Etta's lap, the couple excused themselves with knowing smiles. The lanterns flickered brighter, the night deepened, crickets sang their ancient chorus, and Devaun rose slowly from his seat. He came around the table and stood in front of her. No audience, no spotlight, no grandeur, only the quiet breath of a moment that felt like destiny choosing them again. He knelt, not as the powerful man he used to be, but as the healed man he had become. In his hand, he held a simple ring, a band without diamonds, without spectacle. A symbol of the slow, patient love they had grown together in soft steps. His voice shook as he opened his palm, not with fear of rejection, but with reverence for the woman before him. Etta looked at him, her eyes filled with years of pain, years of strength, and months of watching him transform from the inside out. She lifted her hand to her face, overwhelmed, tears gathering like pearls along her lashes. Then her son stirred, tiny fingers brushing the ring in Devaun's hand, as if giving his blessing. Etta smiled through the blur of emotion, not the cautious smile she once guarded behind walls, not the uncertain smile of someone afraid to hope, but the full, tender, luminous smile of a woman who had rebuilt herself and now chose love from abundance, not need. She offered her hand. Devaun slid the simple ring onto her finger, his own tears falling freely. But as he did, the moonlight struck her other hand, the one resting over her heart. The massive diamond partnership ring, the one symbolizing the empire she created without him, caught the glow and scattered it across the garden like shards of stardust. 2 rings, one for the life she built alone, one for the life she chose to build with him. She whispered yes with the kind of certainty that only comes when a woman chooses love not because it heals her, but because she is already whole. And Devaun gathered her into his arms, careful of the sleeping child between them, holding her with the reverence of a man who had earned nothing but hoped for everything. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in lantern light and quiet wonder. A family, a future, a love reborn not from the ruins, but from the rebuilding. The ring had changed everything, not because it was offered, but because she was finally ready to accept it. Before you go, hold this close. Healing begins the moment someone feels seen, heard, and understood. There's a heart like hers beating somewhere near you, carrying weight no one notices. Share this video with them. Let them know they're not alone, not forgotten, and never without hope. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, drop a comment, and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe to Black Stories Untold for more stories that uncover hidden struggles, celebrate strength, and remind us that every voice matters.